The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's Wickersoft webcast. My name is Jim Patterson. I'm in a sales and business development role for the company. Joining me today is Matthew Willey, who will be providing an in-depth demonstration of the capabilities we're going to talk about in concept today. And our topic today is Microsoft Hybrid PPM, when your teams are agile but leadership thinks waterfall. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. Um, there will be no audio open up for audio questions during the webinar, but if you go to the question panel in GoToWebinar, you can ask questions there, and we'll try to get your questions answered during the course of this webinar. If for some reason we miss any of your questions, we'll respond to you directly via email, and hopefully we'll be able to address anything that comes up. Now, for today's webinar, if you get pulled away or if you get distracted, no need to worry. We are recording the webinar, and at the end of it, we will be sending you a link to the recording as well as a copy of the slides that you'll be seeing today. So with that, let's get started. Some of the topics we're going to address today is really some aspects of the PPM and Agile evolution that's going on in the marketplace today. We'll talk about what we mean by some of the hybrid, both waterfall and agile use cases together. And then we'll talk about some tool implications from a project management perspective and integration trends that we have with those that are happening. And we're going to actually demonstrate some of those today for you as well. At the end, we'll wrap up with some summarization of what we've showed and discussed with you today, as well as some possible next steps if you're interested in pursuing some of these things further. So let's start with the PPM and Agile Evolution topics. A lot of this is being driven today by we're in the age of the digital transformation. Even what we think of brick and mortar companies traditionally have essentially become software companies at their core. The brick and mortar things like the department stores have become the Amazons of the world, and the blockbusters have gone by the way of Netflix and Hulu and such. Traditional taxi cabs and transportation have ride share services like Uber and Lyft, and even the simple things like getting soft drinks at our fast food restaurants has been supplanted by a software computer driven type of experience in those places. And there is an inevitable impact that there's challenges and changes that need to be adopted to across the enterprise. While we're looking at new models and our executives are looking at different strategies and ways to reach our customers, it's meaning that we have more new product development and technology projects coming into the mix than ever before. And it affects all roles in the organization, whether it be the executives that have to come up with these strategies and new business models, the PMOs who have to manage a more diverse set of projects than maybe they did prior, the software development organizations that are key because they touch almost every aspects of the business these days, and in some cases are the differentiators in what they put out in the marketplace. And then ultimately, because there's software that we're putting out that's customer facing and other, we have to support those things in the organization. So there's a ripple effect as to the changes that come about in this transformation age. Now, what this does manifest itself is the speed of change. The rapidity or the pace of the change is constantly accelerating. It's not getting any slower. Windows of opportunity to bring things to market, to remain competitive with the folks that we compete with in the marketplace. The opportunity to move, we can't afford to move slow if we want to survive in this marketplace, just like we saw with things like Blockbuster. Where are they today? So the idea here is we have to have methods that respond to this and adapt to this and allow us to manage our projects and development efforts in a way that accommodates the speed and rapidity of change. Now, to that end, there is a rise more and more of using more agile project management approaches. And so agile project management is on the rise. The CollabNet version 1 State of Agile survey, the last one that was published out there, said that 97% of organizations are practicing agile somewhere in that organization. It tends to bubble up from the team level, so it may only be in pockets of that organization, but you can see that there's a pretty good footprint of the adoption as the where it's taking place, and meaning that if you look at where it was in 2011, it keeps on rising. I mean, obviously, this doesn't mean that people have adopted across the board in all aspects of their organization, but it's very telling that this is a trend in the direction of where we're going with Agile project management. And to that end, and to the fact that Agile tends to bubble up from the team level. Teams may be fully adopted and fully bought into doing Agile, and not all teams may be doing that. But then it really is an organization-wide effect. What's leadership mindset? Are they in a more traditional waterfall mindset? Are the metrics that they're looking for to track the investments that they're making in these projects and development efforts? Are they more traditional and financial in nature and KPI based and the things that they're looking for? And so there's some concern sometimes of adopting an agile mindset from top to bottom. And some of them are the perception, and not all these perceptions are accurate, but the perception that there's a lack of upfront planning and management loses control, and that this breeds some management opposition. So some of the concepts behind what we're talking about today is our teams are agile in responding to the marketplace. Leadership has the needs of what they need to manage the business. And how can we bridge those gaps and make sure that the needs of the all levels of the organization are being met? Now, you know, agile purists will sometimes tell you that almost everything can be managed in an agile fashion. Um, but we're finding in the marketplace as we talk to customers that the reality is that there's a need for a blend of approaches and methodologies. The PMI through a publication called Capturing the Value of Project Management Through Organizational Agility says that smart organizations realize that using agile techniques such as Scrum or DevOps is not the only or even the best indicator of an organization's speed or flexibility, and that most organizations are more likely to use several different project management approaches depending on the type and the nature of work being done. So traditional waterfall may be more conducive to things like infrastructure projects and facilities types of projects, where more agile and iterative for new product development or for software development, et cetera, may be the best way to go. So the idea is that it doesn't have to be a one-size-fits-all approach in the estimations of PMI. And from a Gartner perspective, when they look at PPM and look at what they call the hype cycle and where things are trending, as you look at things go to where they're initially innovated to where they call the peak of inflated expectations, then down through the trough of disillusionment, then up through the slope of enlightenment, and then the plateau of productivity. As you can see, agile project management in general has gone over that peak of inflated expectations and now is down somewhere on that trend of the trough of disillusionment as of 2019. But what's on the upswing and being innovated right now, as you can see, is things like enterprise agile frameworks and business transformation offices and adaptive program management and other aspects of this that are just on the rise. So very early on in these hype cycles are a lot of these agile concepts that we're seeing here today, and Gartner as an analyst seems to recognize that as well. Ultimately, what we look at what PMOs do versus and what PPM solutions must have has changed a little bit, because technology has become highly complex landscape of features. We've added more and more capabilities and functionality, um, um, but is it necessarily a means of empowering you in human creativity, innovation, and intelligence? So even though we have a lot of capabilities that are getting more and more complex on the back end, and even the advent and the interjection of AI that's coming, we look over here on the right and we look at the lighter shaded bricks or blocks that have the more traditional things that we always expected from a PPM solution and a PMO: resource management, portfolio management, schedule and task management, financial management, et cetera. But in this new agile world, we have to layer in new capabilities like providing the ability to address agility, maybe looking at overall work management because there's more than one type of work being managed in an organization, and it impacts our ability to deliver other types of work. Integration, meaning that we have a lot of different systems coming into play that are best of breed within an organization. Having them working together rather than in silos is something that's important. And just because we have a lot of enhanced and very advanced capabilities within solutions, and that's complex on the back end, the user experience expectation is that of simplicity, more of an app mentality today, so that we can get up, load it, and start working with it early on. Have it be something that we want to work with rather than be something we have to work with. And then automation of business process is something that has to be there today if we want to maintain a process that keeps up with the speed of change that we talked about earlier on. So just some aspects to consider here. Now, as we talk about hybrid, waterfall, and agile use cases, what we're looking at is today, because of the proliferation of tools and with the cloud, it's very easy to have teams or individuals adopt individual tools and have a bunch of them proliferate within our organization. Today, people are using different things for traditional project management. I just put up things like Microsoft Project and SharePoint, but there's a whole variety of traditional types of project and portfolio management tools that are out there. For application management and software development, people are using things like Visual Studio, now called Azure DevOps, things like JIRA, version 1, and other tools like that. And in the service management, the more unplanned work, using things like ServiceNow and Salesforce Service Cloud and Microsoft Dynamics. These are all different data sets, different systems, and they end up being silos of information as well as silos of processes. And sometimes different resources get work assigned to them from all of these or a good deal of these, and getting priorities aligned and understanding what we should be working on first. And all those different things can become a confusing maze within an organization. So we have to do a better job of bringing these things together. Now, Gartner in 2015 first coined the term Bi-Modal IT, and we're kind of calling that a little bit more of a hybrid PPM today in this for the purpose of this webinar. But in that Bi-Modal example, the traditional PPM identified as mode 1 is a linear approach to change, emphasizing predictability, accuracy, reliability, and stability. And the analogy there is more of the marathon run with longer cycle times and using methodologies like waterfall, etc. Now, mode 2 is nonlinear, involves learning via iteration, emphasizing agility and speed, and be able to manage change and uncertainty a little bit better and respond to those things better. And this more agile approach in mode 2, the analogy is more of a sprinter. And we have more shorter cycle times and iterations, and we're using frameworks and methods like Agile, Scrum, Lean, Kanban, etc. And the idea here is it's the practice of managing two separate yet coherent modes of delivery. And it doesn't necessarily just have to be IT. One is focused on stability, and the other one's focused on agility and responsiveness to change. Now, the disconnect is, the traditional PPM pieces has been, over the years, been the ones that's been adopted by leadership and by PMOs for governance and managing the entire portfolio of projects. But to them, with the tools of Agile and those approaches being used by teams, sometimes Agile can become a black hole to the PMO and to leadership and have no visibility into the business deliverables when the teams are using Agile. So the question then is, how can they manage or present to leadership a holistic portfolio of all projects and all investments being worked and all initiatives being worked in an organization without having to do manual mashups of data from a variety of silos of information, and then have to conform that into a form and format like things like PowerPoints and other types of reports after you mash up that data so that leadership can digest the information. And then there's the concept of how do you apply things like CapEx and OpEx to the Agile projects. And to the Agile teams, they want Agile for a reason. And to them, sometimes the PPM and governance process is considered overhead, maybe slowing them down. And so the idea is that sometimes they feel it defeats the purpose. But the net result is if they're not tied in with the rest of the organization in that regard, it generally lends itself to having duplicate information being generated. And outside of managing things in their Agile tools and their Agile process, they then have to do separate reporting and separate data sets and separate feeds of data, sometimes duplicate data to which they're already doing, to feed the needs and the metrics that are needed by the PMO and the PPM solution that's being fed up to leadership. So the idea is, how do we minimize those things and how do we bridge those gaps? And the key is we need to find the right balance. We really do need, as we scale these across organizations, we do have to have a proper amount of governance, visibility, insight, and control, but we also have to have enough agility so that we are responsive to the marketplace and we're keeping up or staying ahead of our competition so that we have good innovation and time to market and are responsive to the needs of our customers in the marketplace. So in today's world, a unified PPM and Agile solution, which is the new hybrid project management world, really says we shouldn't be managing these things in silos. We should be able to in a more seamless fashion to have more holistic portfolios that have projects of whatever types of methodology or approach that's being used. So that the idea is that if teams are doing things in traditional waterfall methods versus some variation of the agile themes, those should all fit very nicely in a set of portfolios. And then the roll-up of that information and the metrics being provided to a PMO or to leadership in an organization should be a natural output of that process as opposed to a project in and of itself for us to mash it up like I was referring to earlier. Oops, pardon me. And so it's good to understand where you're at in the Agile PPM type of spectrum. Are you an organization that has fully embraced Agile transformation, is trying to do everything in an Agile fashion and using a more lean portfolio, using more Agile PPM and using all those concepts in there of, strategic themes and value streams and using program increment planning and then managing the details and executing in a more Scrum Agile approach and using more Agile approaches to do that. Or there are some organizations that are doing that wholesale or trying to do that wholesale, but it may not be the majority of organizations that we run in today. And on the right, we've got traditional PPM like we talked about, that mode one, folks that are using the phase and gate methodologies and building waterfall plans and dependencies like we traditionally would do in a Microsoft project. But what we're finding more and more is the rule of the day is that hybrid in the middle. And the hybrid could be happening for a variety of reasons. One is maybe a belief in that organization that different projects require different methodologies and that they will always have some projects being managed in Agile and some being managed in a waterfall fashion. And the other case is there may be organizations that are trying to get to what's on the left, meaning a full Agile transformation, but there's going to be an interim period where not everybody's on board, and some projects will still be in a waterfall fashion and an Agile fashion for some period of time until they reach their stated goal or their holy grail over of an Agile, fully Agile transformation as they go on through. In any regard, all of these things can be accommodated if we take the right approaches, and we can actually have tools that are functional and effective no matter where we're at on the spectrum. Now, some folks will try to go into more enterprise scaled agile using some things like the SAFe framework for those types of things. And it's complex, and SAFe is only one of multiple frameworks for enterprise agile. There's LESS, there's DAD, there's other ones that people use. But to get there, it's really that bubble on the left that we saw for full agile transformation is where people are starting to take what was bubbled up from a team level on a more ad hoc and a consensus level now has to be more formalized so that it works for the entire organization and provides some structure and some framework around the agile capabilities that are going on within there. It's an endeavor to achieve the things that you see here in this diagram. And SAFe requires major organizational change in attitude. So there's cultural, there's process, and there's just system changes that need to happen. It's not easy, and it's a journey, which means to get to that bubble on the left we talked about for Agile PPM, you may spend a considerable amount of time in that hybrid mode as you're going through this organizational change. And then even to go into a lean approach, it's still a long-term initiative. So you may start with a hybrid, and you may maintain a hybrid type of mode for a considerable period of time. And then ultimately, if you're successful, you may get over into a more lean, agile approach across the board if that's something you desire to do as an organization. Though our contention is it's not required for you to get to that state if your organization's priorities or your vision for what you'd like to do and the type of work you do isn't conducive to that. So what we're doing these days is trying to say, let's work with where we're at today, and then let's proceed and mature on the journey we want to be on. One of the ways we can do that is to tie business strategy to work execution, meaning if you look at a portfolio management process and governance process, what we've done over the years is use Project Online from Microsoft to do all that portfolio level capabilities of demand management and intake, portfolio management, meaning analysis and optimization and strategic alignment, and then do all the schedule and resource management and execution in there like we would typically do. Some folks want to do financials in there and collect time and ultimately have business intelligence and reporting out of that. And that's a good solution and place to do all that and have it aggregate into. But in this hybrid or tool proliferated world, it traditionally has done a great job and is one of the best tools out there for waterfall planning in Microsoft projects. So down the left leg of this diagram, natively on that, people could just use the web version of Project Online, Project Web Access, or Microsoft Project Client to do that waterfall planning and have it feed seamlessly into the portfolio as it has in the past. Now, Agile folks, now Microsoft has added some very rudimentary Agile or iterative type of planning into project. So people that don't have anything today could do some of that. But what people have really done in the interim is really adopt some Agile tools for the teams that are actually doing Agile. And that may be a Visual Studio, now called Azure DevOps, and using Azure boards within Azure DevOps to do more Agile type of approaches, or using things like JIRA. So those are, between Visual Studio, Azure DevOps, or JIRA, some of the more common ones that we find out there in the marketplace. They want to execute on that. But the organization still wants to manage the results or the process of getting on board with those things in a more portfolio management driven tool. And things like Azure Visual Studio and Jira really don't have built-in portfolio management capabilities in and of themselves. So for example, you might do a common intake and demand and approval of projects and investments by leadership in a steering committee. You may then allocate those to portfolios and then track it at a portfolio level within something like Project Online. But then the teams are still heads down doing the development work and executing down in the Agile tool of choice. And Wickersoft, using our OneConnect capabilities to use the APIs in Project Online, and we'll show you some additional capabilities as well in this webinar, allows them to be heads down and work in the tools of their choice, but still meet the needs of the organization by feeding that information to the portfolio. So some of the use cases we might talk about, and I'll just do this briefly. We're not going to get into this much today, but the idea here is that Microsoft Project has added over the last year some templates and UI capabilities to do more iterative-based projects with sprint-based planning and doing things with cards and more Kanban style in the way they emphasize that, as well as templates to do the traditional waterfall things. But they both would feed into that Microsoft Project Online portfolio. Now, the other part of this hybrid is that we have models where your waterfall scheduling will be done in Microsoft Project, and the teams might be using Azure DevOps, or formerly known as Visual Studio, to do their more agile-based projects and team projects, and using more Scrum or iterative-based types of approaches to do that, and using more board-style progressing and updating of those things. And the idea is that in our use case, they can continue to do that as they've always done. And with a OneConnect connector, those results can feed into the portfolio for KPIs, et cetera, for leadership and for the PMO seamlessly without them having to duplicate any effort. The same use case holds true for people that are using JIRA. So if you're using JIRA, for example, as an Agile planning tool and an execution tool, that can also feed into the overall portfolio that we're going to show you here today. Now, ultimately, Wickersoft is providing additional capabilities in Project Online that allows you to manage some of the things that the Agile tools maybe aren't necessarily doing in and of themselves. More resource capacity planning so that we can actually do more planning on an FTE basis or on a percentage of allocation basis or on an hours basis, and understand across the organization, whether they're working on Agile projects or more traditional waterfall projects, what is the bandwidth that we have and how much of that are we using up on the capacity on the things that we've already committed to before we decide to do other things. A portfolio analyzer that will look at both the Agile and the non-Agile projects together and look at how we prioritize those, how we might roadmap those and time phase those projects, and then also what the impacts are on the decisions we'd make in that analyzer on a resource perspective as well as a cost perspective. And to that end, there's also a detailed financial planner. So for leadership that wants to track CapEx and OpEx and be able to track cost categories and time phase budgets and actuals against those and revise forecasts, there's financial planning capabilities that's added onto that mix. So at the portfolio level, it can accommodate these dimensions even for Agile projects and non-Agile projects alike. And up top, you may notice we're focusing on Project Online and the use of OnePlan today, but these scenarios are also executable for folks that are using Azure DevOps, Office 365, and Dynamics 365 as well, but our focus is on this use case today. So in this Microsoft hybrid PPM world, we talked about Project Online being the portfolio management backend and repository for all this information. OnePlan from Microsoft providing additional and value-added capabilities to enhance that portfolio level of capabilities that allow us to do more scaled agile like we talked about earlier on. And our OneConnect productized connectors can roll in the tool of choice that you may be using for Agile, whether it be things like JIRA or version 1 or Lean Kit, or even things like AHA or any other team solution that you might want to use. So the idea is, how do we get these things that are now siloed working together seamlessly in a way that benefits the organization and adds value? And ultimately, the payback is to get reporting, dashboards, and analytics as a natural output of the process. And by bringing these data sets together, it more easily allows us to bring agile and non-agile metrics together in a common platform. The Microsoft Cloud solution really leverages native feeds to Power BI. And in the context of what we're going to show you today, it would allow you to report on these things very seamlessly without having to have your reporting be a construction project, each reporting cycle, as it is for many organizations today, where it's highly manual or at least semi-manual in the way they're doing things. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Matthew Willey because of the fact that a lot of this stuff's available to us today. And he'll show you how some of those things are available right now and how we can solve some of these issues. Take it away, Matthew.
Perfect. Thank you, Jim. Alrighty, so I'm logged in here into Project Online. Project Online is part of the Office 365 experience and stack. So you can see here I have access to Project Online, but I also have access to other things like Power BI, which we'll see a little bit later, Power Apps, OneDrive for documents, so on and so forth. And everything here works really well together just natively out of the box. So meaning if I was to upload a document into Project Online, I can access that document straight out of OneDrive or Teams for that matter as well. The data that I have within Project Online can be reported on Power BI and so on and so forth here. What we're looking at is a list of all of our different projects. So this is your one place to go, one source of the truth to see all the different projects. I can see some of those are in different states. So some are requested, some are approved, some are in progress. And I have a timeline / roadmap over here on the side of where these things all lay out from a time perspective. And you can see some high-level progress on these items here in the timeline view as well. And so this is your one place to go to see all of your different projects and how they're going. We also have some KPIs, so overall health schedule, health work, health cost, and any other KPIs and or metrics that you might want to track. The system is very configurable. These are just a starting point, some best practice out of the box KPIs. We can add in other metrics that you might want to track around these projects. Now, some of these projects are going to be agile and managed in an agile way. Some will be waterfall. Some can even be a mixture of both. It doesn't really matter. We bring them all up into one place so that we can still get status and visibility into all of them all together. And as we continue through the demo, you'll see how this works. So as new projects get loaded into the system, they can start out as an idea or request and then get promoted into the project area here. But at some point within your process, before you approve that project, program, or maybe even epic, or basically a bucket of work and value, business value that we're trying to go and get approved, we may need to provide some things to the business so they can better make decisions about what we should do, when we should do it, and figure out are we willing to invest in this, both on the financial side as well as on the resource side of things. And so to do that, I need to come in and fill out some information, basically. So one of the things that I might start with is a high-level resource plan. And so what I'm showing here is up front, early on in the process, we may not know that Matthew Willey is going to be working on this project, but we might know we need a project manager, a tester, a developer, a DBA, a business analyst. And at this point, we're not putting in like detailed tasks or user stories, backlog items, and such. We're just saying at a high level, we think we're going to need these types of resources and for this period of time. We can do that on an FTE basis, full-time equivalent. So I need a half of a project manager in May and in June and so on and so forth. I need a full-time tester in August and September. Or you can also do this in hours or percents if you choose to do so. I'm also doing this by month because at this point, we probably don't know exactly what day we're going to need this tester, or probably even week. We probably just know what month. You can actually do it at different levels of detail at month, quarter, year, week, whatever you might want to do. But a lot of people would do this to start with at a monthly level. Based off of this, we can now better understand what resources we're going to need, how many resources we're going to need, for how long, and so we can start to get a better idea of the scope and the needs of this project from a resource management perspective. At this point, it doesn't matter if it's going to be Agile or if it's going to be Waterfall from an execution perspective. We still need to know up front what we think it's going to take. Is it 10 people? Is it 100 people? Is it 6 months? Is it 2 years? So on and so forth. The next piece of this is then the budget or the financial side. And so what I need to better understand is how much is this going to cost us? So the first thing I can do here is I can just simply hit import, and it'll import the resource plan in and build out my labor costs for me based off of that. So based off of what I had keyed in over there, it's going to fill out those different labor costs, which are all going to roll up and give me my labor cost here. Generally, that's done based off of blended rates per role, per team, per resource. We can set that up multiple different ways depending on how you want that to calculate. But I now have my labor costs. From there, I just need to key in all of my other costs. So I can come in here and I can key in things for, say, materials and supplies and travel expenses and so on and so forth, and it acts very much like an online Excel spreadsheet from this point. These cost categories over here are also configurable, so we can match this up with the different types of costs that you need to break things up in, how your organization works, how it breaks up cost categories. These are just some example ones that are fairly common that we see across many different organizations that we work with. So you can come in, you can build out that budget. Oh, I was on my forecast there. Same thing on the budget tab over here. Come in, build out that particular budget, and let that all roll up, and then that's going to give you your total, planned or budgeted cost for this particular project. So that all rolls up and gives me $453,000 we think we're going to need to go and do this particular project. Later on, once this project's actually approved and you start working on it, then you can use that forecast. And for example, I can compare, say, my budget to my forecast to see how those things differ. I only budgeted a certain amount and I've spent this amount, and you can see where there's reds and yellows and so on and so forth over in the side there. As well as even later than that, I can compare my budgets to my actuals. Those actual costs might be rolling in from your financial system, and or they could be manually keyed in here. There's multiple ways to get those actuals in, but where, regardless of where they come from, we can now start to see, okay, I budgeted this amount of money, I actually spent this amount, and we can see the heat map here, but for overspending, underspending, later on in the process. But up front here, I need to build my high-level budget, I need to build my high-level resource plan, so then we can go and do some portfolio analysis selection, figure out what we're going to do, when we're going to do it, and really start to roll out my timeline or roadmap of when we can get these things done within the budget and resource constraints that we have. So from there, I'm going to go into our kind of portfolio analysis selection area here in the system, and I can open this up here in, excuse me, in full screen so we can get a little bigger view at this, a little more real estate. And so what I'm looking at now is a list of all of the different projects, epics, programs, whatever it might be that we're doing, running this process on. Maybe some of these are epics, some of them are projects, depending on if it's going to go the Agile route or if it's going to go the Waterfall route, maybe a little bit of both. And depending on your terminology, it's configurable. And what you can see here is we have a list of different projects. Some of those are already in progress. Some of those are planned and up and coming. And we need to do some prioritization here to figure out how and when can we get these things done, and or should we go and do those. And so the first thing you'll notice in my screen here is I have a WSJF score, weighted shortest job first. So it's a very popular Agile way of doing prioritization scoring on projects, basically to figure out what's the value of this project. The higher the number, the more quickly and the higher the value I should do this. And so it takes in a few different metrics into account to come up with that score. I can also do more traditional prioritization scores based off of strategic alignment and risk and whatever other business drivers you might want to use. I can also show more financial types of things. You know, what's the budget? What do I think the benefits are going to be? I could show ROI, NPV, IRR, other metrics in here, whatever you might want. And so basically, you pull into your view here the different metrics that you want, and then I can put this into prioritization mode, and I can drag and drop simply, you know, just move things around here to do a stacked ranked priority, but based off of the objective data as I'm looking at it. A lot of people try to do these things in Excel spreadsheets and copying and pasting and all that, and that can get kind of clunky and messy. The other piece here, though, is after I get my prioritization the way I want, meaning this is my highest priority project and the one at the bottom is my lowest priority, you know, that's all great, but we now need to make sure that we account for our constraints, meaning we only have so much budget, we only have so much resources. And so I can come here and I can add on extra layers to this to make sure I'm taking into account my constraints. So I can apply a target here. A target is basically a budget. I'm saying I have $400,000 a month to spend across all these projects. Maybe this is across my IT department as a whole, or you know, whatever grouping of projects I'm looking at. And so I can come and look across these, and if I was to do all of these projects and do them when people are asking for them to be done, you can see here I'm going to have some issues. I'm going to overspend in many of my months. And so there's a couple different options to fixing that, so to say. One is I can go down here to the bottom to some of my lower priority projects, and I can start to uncheck them. And as I do that, it's going to update the bottom grid, and it's going to allow me to basically say, what if I didn't do these projects, or if I put them on hold, you know, how would that then affect my budget? And so I'll refresh accordingly. The other thing that I can do is maybe it's not a matter of if we're going to do these or not, it's a matter of when can we do them. Then what I can do is I can pop out my little timeline, you know, roadmap view, depending on your terminology over here on the side. And I can drag and drop some of these lower priority items out into the future. And as I do that, it will update down here below and show me what if I was to move those things out a quarter, 2 quarters, you know, 3 months, 6 months, whatever it might be. And so we can play around with those and then come up with a scenario where this is going to work. This is going to go green. Scenario, and maybe we save a couple scenarios. So then you can come in here, you can save these scenarios and come back to them at any time. Scenario A, we're not going to do the lowest priority for projects. Scenario B, we're just going to move them out 6 months, you know, whatever it might be. That's how we're going to stick within our budget across, say, the department or whatever grouping we're at. It's all good enough if you have the money. That's one aspect of this, but the other piece that we have to make sure we account for is resources. A lot of times, you know, in organizations, you might get your budget approved, but then you go in to start working on the project and you find that there aren't adequate resources available and or with the right skill sets and such. And that puts projects on delays, you know, makes them take longer than they should, makes them cost more than they should, and just creates all kinds of issues. And so what I can do here is I can switch this to a resource grid, and I can see where I'm having resourcing issues. And then I can do all the same things, continue to drag and drop, move things around, uncheck different projects to see what if we don't do this, come up with a scenario that's going to help me stay within my budget and my resources, basically. So from that point, once you kind of get your plan together and you figure out what you want to do, then we can kind of commit this and lock this in and go at it. You may notice there's also multiple different views in here. So there's a Kanban board view where I can come in and I can look at a Kanban view of the world and see status of these different high-level projects. There's a roadmap view in here where you can come in and see all of your different projects, kind of laid out more in a timeline roadmap, which I can then print and share with other people, you know, so on and so forth there. It's showing all the same stuff, just different ways you can show that. So this is kind of a nice area to come in and do that high-level program portfolio level planning and figure out what we're going to do. Once we figure out what we're going to do, then we're ready to get more into the execution side of things. And so when I'm ready to get into the execution side of things, I can pick my tool of choice to go execute depending on what makes the most sense for that type of a project. Meaning, should this project be Waterfall? Should this be Agile? Am I going to manage it over in Azure DevOps? Maybe I want to use JIRA. You know, maybe we have different teams and different groups using different things. Maybe it's Waterfall, I want to use project. And so you can see here some of these different in-progress projects you can see are using multiple different things. Some are using Project Professional, some are using DevOps, and it could be others. That's just what I have here set up in this particular demo. I can then dive into one of these, like for example, I'm going to go into my support customers using mobile view here, and I can see that this one is actually connected up to Azure DevOps. So if I hit my little connected button, status connected to Azure DevOps, I can disconnect. I can run the sync on demand. If I need to pull the latest information, it will automatically keep this up to date for me up to every hour as well. But if I need to pull in status real quick, I can do it kind of right from there. And if I expand this out, then you'll see that basically this is my epic in this case that I got approved. I'm then pulling in my features and my user stories and my tasks and bugs and such below that. So we can pull that all back in so we have one place to go. Right alongside that, though, if I chose to do so, I could still have a high-level project schedule if need be for this, so that we can get a better idea of timeline. How long is it going to take to go complete this support customers using mobile? It's sometimes hard to see that from a backlog of items because you generally only plan a sprint or two ahead, and so it's hard to understand, when we're going to finish, when are certain deliverables going to be done. And so you may use this in conjunction so that we can even put in just a high-level release plan and or high-level phases and stages of what we think it's going to take to get a V1 of this particular epic out the door, right? And so you kind of can get the best of both worlds without having to double enter any data if you choose or need to do so. Not required by any means. Other projects might just use the schedule component and might not have anything in the backlog. That's fine as well. It's all going to roll up into the same places and into the different reports and such that we're going to see here in just a second. So from there, we've integrated in multiple different execution systems, and we bring it all back into those views like we saw earlier, where we see all of our projects, the KPIs, the state of what's happening, so on and so forth. And as that's all happening, we can report off of it all from a singular place as well, without having to try to do a lot of manual reports and data manipulation, mushing things together in Excel, so on and so forth. So if I'm a manager, let's say I'm an IT manager, I don't want to go to Project Online for my Waterfall project reports and go to Azure DevOps for my Agile reports. I just want to go to one place to see across my full portfolio of projects everything that's going on and how it's doing and get visibility into what's happening. So I can do that right from here. So I'm on a dashboard that we call our Agile PPM portfolio dashboard. I'm here in Power BI, and I can come here and get visibility in all this data. All this is being fed in, through Project Online. It's the engine behind all this that's feeding this all in and giving us the information we need. On the left-hand side, I can see things like portfolio cost, risk, and ROI. These are more traditional waterfall-looking types of metrics, but this is actually the total cost of my total portfolio, both Agile and Waterfall hybrid projects all together, because we're using a common way to track and manage costs around them, right? If I scroll down, we can do bubble charts. We can do more traditional project status types of charts, sometimes known as red eye charts. But on the right side, we can also do more traditional Agile types of metrics, things like sprint burnups, burn downs, bug trends over time, cumulative flow diagrams of user stories. And across all this, we can get visibility into resource availability because we're bringing this all together in one place. Even if I'm working on some Agile work and some Waterfall work and some in the middle, even operational work we can pull into the mix, I can really get a full picture of who's working on what, who's available, who's not, so on and so forth. From a time tracking perspective as well, by the way, you can bring that all into a central timesheet system because it's all coming together into Project Online as well. From there, I can click into any one of these if I want to get more details. So if I want to drill into any one of these tiles on my dashboard, it'll then drill me into kind of the full version of the report. For example, if I wanted to come in and get my project portfolio status here, I can see all my projects, whether they're Agile, Waterfall, or other. I can see high-level status of how they're doing and see, okay, 4 of them are off track, 6 have overdue issues, 22 are behind schedule, 17 are over budget. I can use filters to filter this down and just look at the ones that I want to look at, maybe a certain portfolio or certain type of projects if I did just want to focus in on, say, the Agile ones, et cetera, et cetera. And depending on what type of status I'm looking for, what information I'm looking for, we have tabs across the bottom so you can get what you want. If I'm more interested in a timeline of all these projects, when are these things going to happen? How is this laid out, / roadmap, if you want to call it that? I can come in and look at that view there. If I'm more interested in schedule, meaning are we on track or how far are we off track? I can come in and look at things like duration variance. How far are we off from what we planned to be? Financials, come in and see, how we're looking budgets versus actuals and so on and so forth here. And so there's multiple financial tabs to show that in different ways, as well as if you want to show costs over time. So I have here budgets versus actual cost over time. So if that line goes over the other line at any time, I know that my spend burn rate is too much and I need to slow things down to try to get back on track. Work, so we estimated we were going to spend this many hours, we've actually spent this, and here's what's remaining. If we're tracking work hours, timesheet hours basically, then we can come in and look at those things. And so on and so forth, all the way into very detailed issues and risk management / risk matrices here, where we can show the different risks across all these projects and such as well. The cool thing with Power BI is everything's connected together. So if you were to click on, say, a piece of a pie chart, everything else will filter accordingly. You can drill in, drill out, and you can consume these reports in many different ways. So you can just simply log into Power BI, as I did here, and go and view whatever reports you have access to. But I could also subscribe to these and have it so that every day at a certain time, these people are going to get this report, or once a week, or whatever it might be. So you can set up subscriptions, email subscriptions, so that you stop having to manually try to go print out reports and attach them to an email and send them to so-and-so every so frequently, by a certain time. You can just simply schedule that to happen, and all the latest data is going to make its way over to them. I could also still, though, if I wanted to, print this out to PDF or say export this to PowerPoint if I had a presentation I needed to do where I needed to show some of these reports. There's also a mobile app for this, so there's many different ways that you can then consume these reports with all this great, real-time data to get what you need. Also, besides all these out-of-the-box reports that I'm showing here that you can start from, you can tweak those to kind of fit your needs. They're just templates to start from, but you can change them from there and/or build other reports. And there's some really nice ad hoc reporting capabilities within Power BI as well. It's called natural language query. So I can come in and do things like I want to show average work variance, maybe by project name. We can type in questions and things like this, and based off of what we typed in, it will actually go and create a report for me based off of the information that I've given it. And so you'll see here, it just created this report based off of what I typed in. From there, I can even change it and go, you know what, I want this to be a pie chart. And so if I type in pie there, it'll convert it to a pie chart for me. Click on that, so on and so forth. So we can come in and we can do some ad hoc reporting very quickly without having to, write queries and be the most technical user in the world, simply just by typing in a question. From there, if you want to get fancy, you can come in and you can change these things around. And this piece of that pie chart over there, I want it to be purple, and I can switch that to purple, and I can add drill-ins and everything I might want to do. But it can be as simple as that to come in and get a basic report out of the system with the data you need. From there, I can pin that back to my dashboard, and I'll now have this new report that I just created, within a matter of seconds here. So that's really nice for some ad hoc reporting above kind of the more complex things that you might want and need to do. So with that, you can see how we can go through the whole process from start to finish, figuring out what things we're going to do, selecting the right projects and epics and such, building out our high-level roadmap based off of our resource financial constraints. Then we can go execute on these projects, epics, etc., using the execution tools of our choice, whether those be Agile tools like Azure DevOps or Waterfall tools like Project Desktop, Project Online. And then we can report across all of this utilizing Power BI, all within the Office 365 umbrella here. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Jim for just a few more closing slides, and then we'll let you guys go for the day. So here you go, Jim.
Thank you, Matthew. Thanks for the comprehensive demonstration.
Absolutely.
And can you see my slide?
Yes, we're good.
All right, let's move to summary and wrap up here. So just to recap some of the values of having a hybrid PPM solution that embodies all these different tools and components. One is it keeps your users working in their primary tools and solutions. Couple reasons is one, it can be most effective. It's most conducive to the type of work they're doing. It's also a battle you don't have to fight by trying to pry those tools out of their hands in order to get comprehensive reporting or get standardization across an organization. It provides a lot more flexibility. And it also allows those users to work in tools that are appropriate for their role and maturity from a PPM perspective, as well as for the type of work that they typically do within the organization. As you've seen, it accommodates a variety of methodologies and tools as far as Waterfall, Agile, and some hybrids of those. And consequently, it can improve adoption by minimizing unnecessary complexity and reducing duplication of effort that might happen with the siloed information where we have to actually put the same data in multiple places in order to meet the needs of the organization. Overall, that should drive a better user experience, which should drive better participation, which drives better compliance. So people that have trouble in organizations have trouble getting compliance and getting that data updated, if they're in the tools they want to use and that are more conducive to them, the chances and the probability that they'll be compliant goes up dramatically. It also gives us the ability, as Matthew showed, to integrate all work and resources into a single view. So whether they're agile projects, whether they're waterfall projects, or even ad hoc work, we can accommodate the workloads and do capacity and demand across all of that. And it allows the teams to continue to be agile, but if we do this correctly, leadership also gets the visibility and the metrics they require if they're not fully transitioned into an agile mindset. And then just overall, just better collaboration across all areas of the business, because with the connectors that actually synchronize that data on a time basis, users don't have to do anything unnatural. They just do the work in the tools that they've been assigned and the tools that they want to work in, and the synchronization will happen on a more automated basis. So in a hybrid PPM solution, what are some of the things we have? Well, let's integrate existing team solutions. If the things are in play and they're working on a team level and people want to keep using them, let's make sure we integrate those solutions into the overall enterprise PPM solution mix. Also enable portfolio-wide planning and tracking by accommodating traditional project portfolios and traditional waterfall type methodologies that people are using. So let's accommodate that as well, even if we're in an agile transformation. And single teams that are on the product and product development side of things, let's provide them with road mapping support so we can have timelines to understand where we're headed and what we're committed to and what that looks like from a roadmap perspective. And then just have the flexibility to support whatever scaled agile method you want to use. If we really want to get a handle on this thing from a portfolio management perspective, there's some scaling that will have to happen to roll these things up into mechanisms that you want. If it's safe, you may want to roll these things up into, release trains and value streams and other portfolio designations, and et cetera. And the tool, as Matthew shows, allows you to roll those things up by different types of capabilities. So just a little bit about us here at the end. Wickersoft, we are a full service firm, a technology partner that helps people with these end-to-end transformations. We have advisory services to help people with these transformations, as well as strategic planning and change management, and other consulting that helps get people on the right track organizationally and process-wise. We also have, as you've seen here, a very good practice in solutions and helping people adopt solutions and getting the most out of those technologies and adapting those technologies to the processes, methods that are being used within those organizations. And then operationally, we help with consulting and staffing. We have a staffing arm, as well as provide any training and support needed to succeed in your adoption efforts of these new solutions and methods. And we even have managed delivery and managed services. We have some folks who are staff light, and we can actually provide and administer these things for people as a managed service, if that makes sense for you and your organization. We're a multi-gold certified Microsoft partner. We were established in 2002 as a joint venture with Microsoft. So we're not only a technology partner with Microsoft, we're a business partner with Microsoft and help you in all these areas. The things you saw today with OnePlan and Project Online, those things are also capable to be performed in Office 365 and SharePoint, out in Azure DevOps in the Agile world, and actually in Microsoft Dynamics 365. And we have expertise in all these different Microsoft Cloud platforms. So from a next steps perspective, you saw a generalized demo today. If you're interested, we can provide you a free mini assessment and roadmap of what it might take to get you from where you're at to use some of the things that you saw today. If you're serious and you're kind of making this decision on a tool set and you want to take a serious look-see, we can offer you a free Project Online and OnePlan trial with Wickersoft Chaperone support to get the most out of that trial exercise, so you can get hands-on with it and see how good of a fit it might be for your organization. And also, if you're not that far down the road, let's schedule a personalized one-on-one demonstration and we can address your specific requirements and use cases rather than just the generalized ones that we showed you today. You can reach us at contact@wickersoft.com. Both Matthew and my email addresses were on the cover slide, which you're going to get a copy of after the webinar. And we have a lot of information on our websites, whether it be us.wickersoft.com. We have a specialized site called project-online.com and project-online.com/OnePlan for more information on that. We also have a webinars area at wickersoft.com. We have both the upcoming webinars you can sign up for, as well as a whole roster of on-demand webinars on a whole host of topics that you can access to at any given point in time. So we hope to engage with you. If you saw some things you were of interest today, and we really are making the case and executing for people this whole challenge of taking disparate systems and bringing them together into a hybrid PPM solution and having it be done effectively within the organizations. So with that, I'd like to thank you for the time you spent with us today, and hope you all have a great day.